The 2013 iPhone 5S is without a doubt one of the best iPhones ever made, bringing Apple into the modern iOS layout we know today and sporting groundbreaking hardware features for its time. Plus, it also looks absolutely stunning. Although, despite its innovation, the 5S actually turns 10 years old this year. 10 years already. And so that kind of begs the question, how well does it hold up nowadays? And could you even still use one as your daily driver? Let's find out, starting with the design. And by the way, if you'd like to skip ahead, timestamps are in the description below. So let's take a look at that gorgeous design. The 5S looks pretty similar to the iPhone 5 from the year before, except for the new space grey and gold colors and the removal of the home button square. Everything about this design just works, from the flat sides to the glass antenna pieces on the back to the circular volume buttons. It's just so sleek, definitely one of the best iPhone designs ever. The sides are completely flat, just like what we've seen up until the iPhone 15 series this year, and not only do they look stunning, but they also help you get a better grip on the phone. They don't really dig into your hand like the flat sides on bigger and newer iPhones, and the comfort in the hand is only accentuated by its minuscule size. It's so easy to carry around, your hand never gets tired, and one-handed use is so easy. But then on the flip side, my iPhone 13 Pro Max kind of makes it look like an accessory. So if you're someone who isn't a fan of small phones, the 5S might not look so appealing. Now on the front, we get our 4-inch display with those incredibly despised bezels and the home button, so it's a far cry from the all-screen phones we see today. The home button is actually still present on the 2022 iPhone SE, so it hasn't actually died out just yet, although this was actually the first iPhone to introduce Touch ID. And this was a done revolutionary thing back in the day of having to put your passcode in every single time you wanted to get into your phone. Although unlike the home button on iPhones past the 6S, the 5S only packs first gen Touch ID, not second, so it's not really one of those sensors you can just brush past. You have to sort of hold your finger on there for a good second before you're in, which is obviously a deal breaker. How could anyone possibly have lived like that? Now on the bottom we get our speakers, lightning port, microphone, and to remind us of a bygone era, there's also a headphone jack, as wireless headphones have now taken the world by storm. And come to think of it, that's going to be the lightning port in not too long, as it's just been killed off by the most recent iPhone 15 series. Now the built-in speakers are as expected, not ideal, they're quite tinny, but yeah, 2013 phone, we can give it a pass. Unfortunately though, it is missing modern niceties like wireless charging on the back since it's metal, and it's also missing any kind of water resistance, so dropping it down the loo is highly not recommended. All in all though, it's absolutely gorgeous, definitely a lot better looking than anything we've recently seen in my opinion, and it also feels great in the hand. So 10 out of 10 on the design. The display though, you might think is going to be quite far from a 10 out of 10 by today's standards, and I mean, it is, but it's surprisingly good for a smartphone display that's 10 years old. I mean, sure, it's tiny at 4 inches and the resolution is only 1136 by 640, but the pixel density at 326 pixels per inch is high enough so that from a normal viewing distance, you can't see any individual pixels. So yeah, the small screen does make it, of course, a lot harder on the eyes for reading articles or watching content, but at least it'll be sharp and pixel free. And the colors and dynamic range are still pretty applaudable. Of course though, its age does mean that, like the design, we are missing a few modern luxuries. The display is only LCD and not OLED, so you're not getting those deep true blacks, and the refresh rate is only 60, not 90 or 120 like we'd see on a flagship today. So swiping around and scrolling is going to be a lot less buttery than on a lot of the most recent flagship phones, but I mean, what can I say? It's 10 years old, completely different era in terms of tech. All in all, it's held up surprisingly well. Yes, it's absolutely tiny, but in terms of the actual image quality, it's still pretty decent. However, what's more than decent is getting 50% off unlimited mobile data, paying $15 a month instead of $30 with today's video partner, Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile allows you to get affordable unlimited 5G data for as low as $15 a month without sacrificing any coverage, speed or data like so many cheap and nasty brands make you do. And plus, Ryan Reynolds owns the company, something I bet you can't flex about your current mobile plan.
Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, owner of Mint Mobile. Enticing, right?
Mint Mobile keeps the costs low by selling online instead of in person, which cuts out the cost of retail stores, and yet it's the largest mobile network in the US. With Mint Mobile, you can't notice a single bit of difference in speeds compared to mainstream services, whether that be YouTube, games, or simply just reading the news or browsing the web. What's better is that their sign-up process is just as quick as their mobile service, taking just 15 minutes to switch carriers via eSIM. Or if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, they'll ship you a physical one for free. There's 1,440 minutes in a day, so why not just spend 15 of those signing up for Mint Mobile using this QR code or via the link in the description. In doing that, you're getting, again, 50% off an already insane deal for unlimited 5G data. And thank you so much again to Mint Mobile and Ryan Reynolds for partnering with me for this video. And now let's take a look at the iPhone 5S's cameras. Have they stood the test of time? So the 5S's camera setup isn't too complex, just an 8 megapixel sensor on the rear and a grisly 1.2 megapixel selfie camera. Unfortunately, the display's somewhat grateful aging hasn't leaked into the main lens. It's really quite mediocre, although it's actually not entirely uncommon to get a somewhat decent shot. But overall, dynamic range needs quite a bit of work, close details are often fuzzy, and because there's no stabilization, it's a lot harder than on a modern phone to get a shot that isn't blurry to some degree. Although I will say that somehow the colors aren't actually that bad. They can look pretty vibrant sometimes. Don't know why, but they do. Now the sensor is also lacking in size compared to newer models. I mean, the camera on the 5S is literally the same size as the flash on my iPhone 13 Pro Max, and as we all know, smaller sensor equals less light coming in, so there's much less detail, and it's especially bad in those indoor situations where the lighting isn't so consistent. Plus, you can forget about all the gizmos like portrait mode, night mode, pro raw photography. It all feels very bare bones after 10 years. But you know, every once in a while, the 5S can actually take a somewhat alright shot, but it has to be in really good lighting conditions. All in all, it's a camera you're going to want to avoid using as your daily driver. There's really no point when there's so many better options out there, but I'll come back to the 5S's alternatives a little bit later. Now yes, the main camera does suffer because of its age, as you'd expect, but the selfie camera just takes that to a whole new level. It's a whole 1.2 megapixels and pretty much never performs well. Every single selfie you take will be blurry, grainy, or just quite a mess to some degree, and even for 2013 standards, this actually was pretty below par. Now video can be recorded in up to 1080p at 30 frames per second, and it's quite similar to the rear camera's photos. It's not even going to come close to blowing anything away. Dynamic range suffers, there's no stabilization, and don't even get me started on the plethora of video gizmos it's missing compared to the flagships of nowadays. I mean, in its defense, this would have actually been darn top end for 2013, and you can still tell what's going on in the image. All in all, the camera setup on here is missing quite a bit compared to now, both in terms of photography and videography features and the actual image quality, but I mean, there's definitely much worse out there. Now, the performance on here, like the cameras, is pretty reflective of its decade-old existence. The iPhone 5S packs the Apple A7 chipset along with 1GB of RAM, so you guessed it, you're not going to be doing anything remotely intensive. But on the other hand, swiping around the interface, scrolling articles, looking at photos, sending texts and emails, they're not going to be buttery smooth, but it's also not really what I'd call a terrible experience. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want to be using this kind of performance in day-to-day life, but it's not so underpowered that it gets frustrating, at least not right away. Of course though, 3D games, running tons of things in the background, and sending large files are pretty much off the menu. However, the A7 chipset in here was actually super advanced for its time. It was the first smartphone chip in the world with a 64-bit architecture, as opposed to the 32-bit systems previously used, which basically means it's a ton more powerful than its predecessors like the 5 and 4S. And I've played around with all three of these phones before, and it's absolutely a noticeable difference today. I mean, the 5 and 5C on iOS 10 again aren't exactly what I'd call 100% unusable, but it's a lot slower than the 5S on iOS 12. And then the 4S, which came out a year before the 5, is an absolute disaster on iOS 9 nowadays, so the enormous performance jump definitely shows on the 5S in the long run. I'm actually quite happy with the phone being left on iOS 12. I feel like anything further would have definitely slowed it down to the point of being really unpleasant to use. Now, because the phone is stuck on iOS 12 and hasn't received any updates in 4 years, app compatibility is disappearing year by year, and there's already tons of apps that either don't work at all full stop, or you can only download the latest compatible version, which may be missing quite a few features and cause other software problems depending on the app. I mean, let's take Instagram for example. Right now, it still has the vast majority of its functions like stories, DMs, liking posts, and for now, that's the case with a large variety of apps. But as iOS 12 fades into obsolescence, so will the app usability on here. It's only going to get less compatible and therefore less usable as time goes on. I mean, it's probably still got, maybe 1 to 2 years left of somewhat trouble-free use left, but it's by no means any kind of long-term solution, or even present solution actually. As I said before, I'll cover some actual solutions in a bit. And lastly, the battery life on here is, well, yeah, pretty rubbish. With an already small battery that has had years to degrade, that doesn't leave a lot of hope for the 5S's battery. You can't really get anything more than like 1 to 2 hours of screen on time, even with light to normal use, and even if you replace the battery, the chipset will still struggle to maintain the more modern software efficiently. So yeah, even if the other aspects didn't convince you that the 5S is far from your best option in 2023, the battery life on here should be the final nail in the coffin. And so with pretty much every aspect of the 5S in 2023 now covered, it's pretty safe to say that its days of modern usability and a pleasant user experience are pretty much finished. But as a whole, this does remain one of the most important iPhones in history. It brought so many upgrades like the performance, and it added Touch ID, and it had one of the most undeniably gorgeous smartphone designs ever. But with that being said, please don't go out and buy this phone in 2023. The specs are just simply too old, and app compatibility isn't going to last much longer. And I mean, at under $70 USD on the used market, it's cheap, but it's also nowhere near cheerful. You can get a used iPhone XR for around $200 or a second gen iPhone SE for $150, and those are both worlds better than the 5S in literally every aspect. I've actually done reviews on my channel about them if you want to go check those out. Or if the premium phone in a small form factor is appealing to you, the iPhone 12 and 13 minis on the used market are coming down in price nowadays, so that could be worth looking into if you're after that form factor in a premium device. But yeah, all in all, the 5S is an iconic phone with a gorgeous design, and while it's a far cry from the shiny new gadget it was in 2013, I highly doubt we'd be where we are now without it. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please make sure you drop me a like and subscribe to TechSpree for more reviews, insights, and the occasional unboxing. Also, if you'd like to have a stalk, my Instagram is at tech_spree, and my Twitter is at techspree1. Thank you so much for watching. This is Tom with TechSpree, and I'll see you as always next time.